Okay, it looks as though we are ready to get started. So I would like to welcome all of you who have come out this evening and anyone who may be watching at home via Zoom to this evening here at Shalom Spirituality Center. We are very fortunate to be about to be addressed by Mayor Cavanaugh and by Gina Bell, the City of Dubuque Sustainability Coordinator. Got that right? Okay. And they're going to be speaking to us about From Dubuque to Dubai and Back, key reflections or takeaways from the COP28. So with no further ado, I will turn things over to our presenters.
Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. How are we doing tonight? It's good to see you. Some smiling faces here. The weather's nice. We're all in good moods. This is very great. Well, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for the invitation to be here. We're very excited to talk about this. I think this is our last official presentation on this particular topic, but Gina and I have really enjoyed having the chance to not only talk about this, but also get to know each other even better. I told the story last time that when we talked about this, but we didn't even realize that we graduated the same year from high school. Gina went to Wahlert, and I went to Hempstead, and we, on our way to Chicago on this trip, went through the list of people we knew from high school and realized we were probably at the same places at the same time and didn't even realize it. So it was really pretty fun. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of background really quick on how this all came about, and then we'll kick it off. And Gina's got a great presentation she's put together that we just kind of tag team through. And I want to make sure we give you plenty of time to ask questions and talk a little bit more about what it is you would like to know about. I mean, we'll give you some of our takeaways and some of the story of what happened while we were in Dubai, and then we can make sure we have plenty of time to have questions and answers and things like that. I was invited back in October of last year to an event called City Lab. So Michael Bloomberg, is everybody familiar with Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, has a whole lot of money from his previous work that he has done. And to his credit, he's actually taking that money now and spending it on empowering local governments to do the things that state and national governments just aren't getting done. It really is kind of an amazing model, and I was not that familiar with it. And when I got the invitation to City Lab, I didn't know what it was. I'm going to be completely honest. I had no idea, and I looked it up and realized the one the year before was in Amsterdam, and they invite mayors from all over the world to be a part of these discussions. And this one was in Washington, D.C., and I went in for, it was about I think it was 4 days that I was there, spending time with mayors and staff from all over the world to discuss things like sustainability and housing and transportation and the arts and some of the main focal points that the Bloomberg Philanthropies actually focuses on. And it was fascinating. I felt way out of my league. I had one bus ride where I sat next to the new provost at Johns Hopkins University, and I just struck up conversation and asked, so before you're provost, what were you doing? He's an astrophysicist and actually the next day was going to be going to study planets with the new telescope that's up there, not the Hubble, but the Webb telescope. And I just kind of shook my head like, I'm from Dubuque, it was really fascinating. But what I realized when we were there was that I got invited because I am from Dubuque. That's the reason that I was there. It's because of the work that we've done in the past, ways in which we've made these relationships and connections with other organizations throughout the world and throughout the country. And it was a great honor to serve in that role and to continue to serve in that role. Pretty sure I got COVID while I was there because I came home and was completely down and out for a solid 2 weeks. I mean, I really was not feeling well. And in the middle of that, got this other invitation from Bloomberg Philanthropies to go to Dubai. And my first reaction was, no thanks. I was so tired. It didn't register. I have to be completely honest. And then I have a lovely wife who is very good at talking sense into me, and she did very quickly. And I realized exactly what this all was. And I didn't actually say no. I never told anybody that. I was just in my own head. But when I realized what this really was and realized that Gina was going to be able to come with me, it really clicked how much of an honor it was to be in this group of people who was invited. And again, it was the Bloomberg Philanthropies group with several other groups that invited mayors and staff from all over the world to be a part of this to what they called the Local Climate Action Summit. And the whole point was essentially to say, okay, nations who come together on an annual basis and talk about all these different ways in which we're going to try and actually make something happen about climate change in the world. If you're going to do this, local governments are going to be at the table because that is where the work gets done. And I was very happy that somebody was doing that and making that point on the international stage. So that was basically the invitation and kind of how it started. So I'll turn it over to Gina, and then we can kind of talk about some of the details. We're going to walk you through just what it was like for us. We were there. Gina took a lot of pictures and has some really good ones here to show us what Dubai was really like, and also talk a little bit more about the experience. So we'll just kind of go back and forth here.
And I'll tell you that when I got invited to Dubai, it was the mayor walking to a meeting, and he popped his head in my office and he said, "I think we got invited to Dubai." And I was like, "To COP28?" And he was like, "Yeah, maybe. I'll talk to you about it after this meeting." So I was like just sitting in my office waiting. And then it turned out he talked to the city manager, and the next day, on Thursday, I got the official invitation, which was really exciting. So I don't know if you know what COP is. COP is the Conference of the Parties. It's a United Nations Climate Change Summit. It happens annually in different regions all over the world. And a notable COP from the past was in 2015 in Paris, where the Paris Accords came out. And this is the agreement that we sort of worked towards. Mayor Buell, I believe, was there at the time representing Dubuque, but we hadn't, I don't think, gotten an invitation since. So this was really exciting for us. Sorry, I'm not going through all my slides. In Paris, it's a legally binding agreement that 196 countries signed on to say, hey, we agree to aim to keep global temperatures at 2 degrees Celsius or below and aiming for 1.5 degrees. So there's a lot of pieces that come into that, but at this COP, I argue, I will say one of my takeaways is I think it was probably the most notable COP since 2015. And these are just photos. Not all of them have a lot of significance. They were just kind of to show what it was like there. Normally, COPs are attended by politicians and diplomats and world leaders. Not to say that you're not a world leader, but in general, mayors are not invited. In 2015, Michael Bloomberg and the Paris mayor held like a side event that invited mayors, but they weren't included in the actual proceedings and negotiations. And this year, Michael Bloomberg wanted to see mayors. He recognized that mayors are the ones that are taking climate action and really dealing with the impacts of climate change, and that they're the ones that are going to take this action needed to keep these agreements. It can't just happen at a national level. So he paid for us to go. It's not taxpayer dollars. I want to keep reminding people of that. He covered all of our expenses, both of us, to attend and participate. And so it was really exciting to have what Dubuque has done and what we plan to continue to do a part of the conversations. So this is where we were in Dubai, which is a part of the United Arab Emirates. And during the COP conversation, and it's 12 days long, we were not there for the whole 12 days, but it's plenty of negotiations, but it's also side meetings and presentations and exhibitions, and people talk about what their plans are, and there are other people who are saying, hey, this is the most important thing, and everyone's priorities are there and out, and they're saying, hey, we're really fighting for this. So this is a map in Dubai. The DIFC, which is the Dubai International Financial Center, is where our hotel was. And then every day we rode the metro to Expo City, which was massive in scale. I mean, it was like a whole city in and of itself. I feel like I want to write like a COP user's guide to be like, just wear comfortable shoes and wear layers and bring protein bars because you don't know if you're gonna get to eat. Okay, and so then this is the venue, and it's divided into two sections, the blue zone and the green zone. So the blue zone is where all the negotiations take place. We wait in long lines and go through security, but you also, then you're just like walking around this area with world leaders, and then that's where the country pavilions are. So each country that is there has a pavilion or a space where they can host their own panels or have negotiations or meetings. And then the green zone is more like Disneyland. There's Sustainable Disneyland. There are some really cool things that are permanent at the Expo Center in Dubai. They had Terra, which is the permanent exhibit there, which is all focused on sustainability. I have a couple of pictures later on. And normally at COPs, this is where protesters hang out and protests take place. Because of United Arab Emirate law, which forbids protesting, the United Nations took that into consideration, and in the blue zone, it's United Nations law, and in the green zone, it's host country law. And so they allowed many protesters who normally wouldn't have been in the blue zone into the blue zone to carry out their protests. So day one, we traveled across the globe, and we went to sleep, and then we woke up and we headed to breakfast with several mayors, and then we basically made our way to the Expo Center. It took at least an hour, and that was like one of the more enjoyable trips, I think. I don't know if you want to pop in here. And then, oh.
Has anybody ever flown in a plane for 14 hours straight before? Have you done that? That is the wildest experience, is it not? I mean, it's such a long time. And then so we left at 7 o'clock at night in Chicago and arrived at 7 o'clock at night in Dubai. We lost an entire day of our life on the way there. It was crazy. So we go and then, and we didn't see the sun for about 24 hours. It was a very strange feeling. I woke up at 3 in the morning on the first day, and I was ready to go. So it was quite the experience. But yeah, this was the train ride on day one was with several different mayors in the United States. They were all United States mayors. It was a really interesting ride.
Yeah, and so then once we got in and we got credentialed and we sort of were exploring, we definitely wandered around looking. We found the U.S. Pavilion. We were like, we're going to find the Local Climate Action Summit, the Bloomberg Pavilion, so we can get our bearings. There's a picture of that later, you can see. And then in the afternoon was the kickoff. It was the Local Climate Action Summit. The COP presidency was there. Michael Bloomberg was there. Lots of other world leaders, many mayors and governors. And it was just the kickoff. And I have a link in here. If I can share the slides later, you can look at what it's on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing and feel like you were right there. So here are just a couple of more pictures of the buildings at the Expo Center. It was, what did somebody point out at the Resiliency Commission? This is what you can do when you have all the oil money that you want. So we certainly recognize that there was some irony in attending a climate action or a climate change summit in a country that is very dependent on oil, and a city that very much exists because of oil money. So climate change, as all of you know, has been a long priority. Sustainability has been a long priority for mayors in Dubuque, first Mayor Buell and now Mayor Cavanagh. And it was really exciting to watch and to hear from other mayors. I was telling someone earlier, when I went to Dubai, I was feeling a little bit disillusioned in my work. It just like, I'm watching the science, I'm watching things happening, and it's not, changes aren't happening fast enough. We don't have enough money, we don't have enough staff. I want to make these big impacts, and it doesn't feel like we're doing anything. And like, it doesn't really matter what Dubuque does. And then coming together with all these other mayors, with all these ideas and all their staff was really heartening for me and really exciting to be like, hey, there are 70,000 people here who are all fighting for the climate impacts, and like, we have to stand together and do something. So that part was really exciting. Here is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with our trusty Sustainable Dubuque case booklet, but now it made its way to Dubai, and the mayor's standing there with it. And then, as I mentioned, like, conventional thinking of the COP was that this is a national discussion. And so Bloomberg's influence and also at the invitation of the COP presidency really allowed mayors to come together and talk. So there were 250 mayors from around the world, and 30-something from the United States. So Dubuque was one of 30-something U.S. mayors that were represented, which is a big deal. So those were all exciting things. Here are just a few more scenes. Oh, and then something that was interesting, I had mentioned the Paris COP earlier, and at that time there were 100 global cities that had committed to ambitious greenhouse gas reduction goals. And at this COP, there were 1,000. So it's slow, but it's happening. This is the secret doorway to the Bloomberg Pavilion that we walked around the building many times looking for. They eventually got a sign up, but I don't think that sign was there when
There were probably about 40 of these buildings that looked just like that. And Gina and I think, walked around in circles for about a half an hour before we finally found this secret door that we had to go through to be able to go up 2 flights of stairs. And we got there, and all of a sudden, there's everybody. They're all right there. But it was such an interesting experience trying to get up there.
Yeah, so this is the COP presidency, also an oil executive for United Arab Emirates. But I definitely drank the Kool-Aid. This man is very intelligent. And while he says, like, yes, we continue to extract fossil fuels, and that's our bread and butter, we are also looking to the future, and we recognize that we're going to use this money that we have now to change to renewables. And he's, I mean, it might have all been a show, who knows? But what he was saying, I was in agreement with, because it's realistic, or it felt realistic to me. Okay, I'm gonna try to play this, but I can't.
So this is where most of the main events and main negotiations were occurring, and main presentations and things like that out in the open. This was the main theater where that happened. We were invited into that theater. I was at least once. I don't. Did you spend more time there?
I went to a couple of them.
So yeah, there were moments where we were able to go in. We both had blue zone passes, but that didn't mean we could just go anywhere we wanted. You know, there was pretty tight security getting certain places. But the first time we went in here was for the actual local climate action summit event, the kickoff, and we walked in, and you sort of realize where you are when all of a sudden they're a little behind schedule, and the event right before you is Emmanuel Macron from France, and somebody help me with the Prime Minister from the United Kingdom. What's his name? Wait, yeah. We all know who we're talking about, right? But I cannot remember the poor gentleman's name. So he was there. Prime Minister Modi from India was one of the presenters. I mean, they were all on the stage together having a discussion, and you're sort of just sitting there thinking, "Wow, this is the real deal. These guys are really here having these discussions, and we're a part of it as well." So it was. I think on purpose they made this room a little bit overwhelming, and the video screens were everywhere to show you all these things, and everything was really well done in providing the message that was sort of repeated over and over again, that we are going to do something. We're going to do something at this event that we're at. And that was, at least for the time that I was there early on, kind of the message that was going. You can talk a little bit more about the later days when you stuck around too, but you'll get there.
Well, I was joking when I showed this video in an earlier presentation that it felt like we were being brainwashed a little bit, like a science fiction movie, but in the best possible way. Like, we're gonna make bold action towards climate change, and we can do it. So I was okay with it. So after the kickoff of the local climate action summit, we had a reception where we got to hang out with some other mayors and have this delicious tiny burger. Food is important everywhere, so. Oh, sorry.
It's hard to find during the day. That was one of the things we learned.
Yes, we did forced intermittent fasting. So, so day 3 of COP, which was our second day in Dubai, was a long day of meetings. So the mayor attended the Innovation Studio, which was at the local Climate Action Summit. It was mayors only, so it was like all the staff members in the stairwell hanging out, being like, what are they saying? Are they texting you? What did your mayor say? And they were talking about, I mean, I don't know if you want to share the different things you talked about.
Well, one of the biggest was, it's funny because they do these mayors only things, and it really is the same stuff we talk about when we're with everybody else. I'm not exactly sure what the mayor's only purpose is all the time. Aside from what it usually means is no press. That's really what they're saying. They want people to be able to be honest and say things openly, especially in these moments where we need to have some serious discussions about things. So I I'm going to be completely honest here that I don't recall anything that was earth-shattering, that was any different than the rest of the discussions we were having, aside from the announcements that were made, because I know you want to talk about that, the announcement that was made for the grants that we are now able to access through Bloomberg Flame.
I definitely got a text from the mayor that said, Bloomberg just announced a huge grant to involve youth in climate action. And so we filled out the letter of interest, and then we actually just submitted our application 2 days ago. So we're hoping that that will bring $50,000 to Dubuque for youth-led climate action. And then if we can disperse that money within 6 months, Bloomberg will give us an additional $100,000. So if you follow city budgets, that's more money than I usually have to put towards climate action, and this will engage youth in a way that we haven't been able to do before. So it's really exciting. So fingers crossed on that one. They also talked a lot about the urban nature program and including nature in urban spaces. And I was texting Jared McGovern, who's in the audience, like, hey, I need some ideas here, buddy. And he was like, I've never gotten a non-spam text from Dubai. But so there were some really exciting announcements, and then we continued on with, this is a group of the mayors and Bloomberg staff that were at the summit. And then, so later that day, or no, around midday, we met with John Podesta and the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, and I will let you talk about that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So Dubuque was actually one of the founding cities for the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. It's been around for about 11 years now. I found out about it when I became mayor. Terry Goodman, many of you know Terry Goodman, told me, you will join this organization. And I understand why now. You know, they really, what it is it is every single city and town up and down the Mississippi River. Any town of any size can join. So we have very large cities. What we have here is, so me, obviously, this is Mayor Eric Simmons from Greenville, Mississippi, small little town in Mississippi. LaToya Cantrell, New Orleans mayor, and then Mitch Reynolds from La Crosse, Wisconsin. Mitch is the chair this year of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. There's always a smaller city and a larger one that are the chair organizations. So one of the things that MRCTI does is a lot of national advocacy in Washington, D.C., and then they always go to COP. They always take at least 2 mayors to COP. Well, this time we were all able to be there since the whole Bloomberg situation came up, and more of us were able to travel. So we had a meeting with John Podesta, and so John Podesta is I can't remember his exact title, but he basically works with the Inflation Reduction Act to try and roll out the programs within the Inflation Reduction Act for the Biden administration. That's his main role. And we had already had a meeting with him and his staff in Washington, D.C. last year, talking about some of the ways that we were struggling to get the funding that we need to do conservation work on the Mississippi River. There are some pretty big projects that MRCTI is working on doing along the river. But one of the things we're discovering is it's really hard to cross political boundaries. The federal government doesn't like to give money to regions. The federal government likes to give money to Dubuque or Iowa or Illinois, but not Iowa and Illinois together, and not Dubuque and Bettendorf together. You know, we can't do those things according to the federal government. That was really what we're talking to him about. We want to try to create some projects, or at least MRCTI wants to do some projects that would actually allow us to be able to access some of these funds for groups that have come together to do these things. So larger projects along the river, especially for things like floodplains and conservation areas and those types of things. So it was one of the more interesting meetings that I've ever had, because we sat down with him. First of all, we rode the elevator up with him because we just ran into him at the secret building and showed him where the elevator was because nobody can ever find it. And then we just rode up and asking how Dubuque's doing and all these fun things. And he's an extremely nice man, by the way. He's just a really nice guy. And we get in the meeting and we sit down and give him a pitch, and all of us get a chance to talk. And then he goes, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We should try to do that. I'm going to get this guy and this guy and this guy on this, and they're going to start working on it, and we'll meet you guys again in Washington, D.C. when you come back for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which was just this past January. Sure enough, we did. We talked about it. So it's moving. Now, whether or not it actually is going to do anything, I don't know, but I've never had anybody say yes that fast before in any of these meetings, so it was really kind of fun. So that's Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, and I think the main point here is to recognize how many groups come together and how many groups overlap, to make sure that all these relationships are actually working together to do something. And this is one of those great examples, I think.
So this was another thing that came out of COP, it's called CHAMP, or the Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnerships. 63 national governments endorsed it, and it's really looking at how we can continue to collaborate between national governments, subnational governments, and then within the global realm of things, and commit to doing action. So that was, yes, like another exciting thing that happened. This was also part of the local climate action summit. So Gina McCarthy, former EPA administrator, first White House climate advisor. She's now the managing co-chair of America is All In. So that's the US commitment to addressing global climate change. And then Nina Hachigian, I think I finally got it. Who is, let's see, she is the special representative for city and state diplomacy at the State Department. And so she really looks at working, building relationships between subnational governments and across regions. So she's also a part of, she was in Mexico City when I got to travel there for the city's Forward initiative, where we were paired with Hermosillo, Mexico, to work on climate change and sort of share technical assistance and knowledge. So we're talking to them about our brownfields experience. They're talking to us about electrification of vehicles. And so she was also a part of that. And she's, I mean, I think, have you met with them in DC as well, with Nina?
Not her specifically, but the State Department has gotten much more active, again, under the Biden administration, to connect local governments to the international community. So the Department of State, where she works, is actually making a lot of effort to reach out to us on a very local level to talk about how we can be a part of these larger discussions like this. So they're very active in all the different groups that I've been a part of.
And this is me fangirling with Gina McCarthy. We share the same name, I mean, come on. And also me fangirling with the mayor.
Right.
Okay, and then day 3, we had a really great Climate Mayors breakfast. And I met some State Department folks there. C40 Cities was also there. And then the mayor left shortly after that. And then I attended some other meetings. So I got to meet with Bezos Earth Fund, ICLEI, which is Sustainability for Global Governments, the We Mean Business Coalition, which I'm really excited to eventually start working with them, where it helps businesses who don't have like sustainability directors, but are interested in benchmarking their energy use or tracking their greenhouse gas emissions. It's a whole setup that's sort of like user-friendly and offers technical assistance that businesses can use. And so if there are businesses in the city that want to start doing this work, there's a really easy resource that it's not all falling onto my office's shoulders. Were you gonna say something? Oh. And then I did a little bit of wandering in Dubai. I didn't have a ton of time, but I went to the Contemporary Art Museum and I went to the Spice Market. So that was very disappointing to some people who wanted me to like ski inside of the mall in Dubai. But if you know me at all, that wasn't really my thing.
Or rent a Lamborghini or Ferrari for a little while.
Yes, I really missed out. There are a lot of really nice cars. I don't know what they were, but they seemed really nice. And then I also attended this ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change to create better urban environments. And like, I don't always think of Dubuque as an urban environment because I lived in a bigger city for a long time, but one of the points we made when we were talking with Bezos Earth Fund is that natural areas in Iowa are in cities because the rest of our landscape is monoculture. And so, you know, my point was, if they want to fund Iowa, they should fund cities because we're the ones that are protecting natural areas and creating more natural areas. And they seemed really interested by that fact. Like they were like, oh, you know, you think of Iowa and you think of farms. And it's like, yeah, but that's not nature. I mean, we can argue those points. Okay, so here are my takeaways, and feel free to jump in. But so my first takeaway, this is a picture from breakfast. There are the mayors and then their staff taking the pictures. This COP was historic. The wording was historic, and it's not enough. But from like a high level or a global level, this was, in my opinion, the most significant COP ever. If only for the fact that they finally named fossil fuels in the agreement, because this is the first time. So 28 times they've met, and never once have they actually put fossil fuels into the agreement. And so they're now named in the agreement, and the agreement says that there is a transition away from fossil fuels. But there are also, they established a loss and damage fund. I think they talked about methane emissions, which also hadn't been discussed very much. They talked a little bit about bridge fuels. And let's see what else. Oh, and I also felt like they really were trying to ground it in truth. They weren't just putting these things out there. Yes, it's ambitious, but they were saying, like, is this even realistic? And I guess it depends on which scientist you talk to see if it's realistic. Okay, my second takeaway were my observations. And at first we felt like, when we first got there, like we were the center of the universe, like where all these big decisions were happening. But as I sort of spent more time there, it felt very human focused. It wasn't just about reducing greenhouse gases. It was like, what are the impacts to human beings? And that is like what lights me up and why I show up to my work every day. And so it was like nice to see my 70,000 closest friends also feeling that way. I also felt like there was a big push for nature-based solutions. So looking at sort of nature's perfection and imperfection and saying like, hey, nature's been doing this way longer than humans. What does nature know that we don't? And trying to use that as our guide. Youth were a major focus. And so that was really exciting. I mean, not just because Bloomberg announced all this funding for it, but just there were a lot of young people there. And some were protesting, some were part of the negotiations. And it was really exciting to see so many youth from around the world participating. And then there are lots of really cool national initiatives that came out of the Inflation Reduction Act or already existed that we can participate in that I didn't know about. So those were some high-level takeaways. Okay, this was a good one. So we were greeted in our hotel rooms with these lovely chocolate globes with golden camels that were also chocolate and brown sugar sand. And I don't know, was it day 2 or day 3? Yeah. The mayor's wife texted me and said, I don't think this is a good sign because theirs had melted in the sun, which seemed very fitting for a climate change conference in a desert that just looks like a city. But my takeaway about this melting globe is that what Dubuque does in terms of climate action has a global impact. And I wouldn't have said that on November 30th when I left. I really had felt like, yes, it's important that we do our part, but like, does it really matter? And after being there and spending time and seeing what other cities are doing and other world leaders are doing, I really feel like it does matter and we have to continue to accelerate. My story was that I randomly got into a Tesla on the last day that I was there to go to the session. We'd ridden the metro and I walked out and they're like, oh, we're going, do you want to come with us? And I was like, oh, sure. Jumped into a car with strangers. This tracks. My parents are here. They're like, yeah, that seems nuts. And one of the gentlemen was from the Amazon basin in Ecuador. I'm a Spanish speaker. I lived in Ecuador, so we started chatting. And we were talking about what we do, and he said, oh, you live along a river? You're a river person? I'm a river person. We're river people. Like, we're connected. Our waters connect us. And now we have plans for, like, his daughter's gonna study in Dubuque, and my daughters are gonna go study in the Amazon when they're a little older. And we text on WhatsApp all the time, but we made this connection, and it really made me think, like, yeah, we do. Like, what we're doing to the Mississippi isn't just about, you know, what happens in Louisiana. It's what happens in the Amazon basin, and what they're doing impacts us. And so I came back with a renewed sense of urgency, but also hope that we have to keep doing this, and what we are doing matters. Okay. Sorry, I skipped some pictures. My fourth takeaway is that there's funding, and not just the Inflation Reduction Act. We're coming up against some real challenges with state-level politics and accessing federal funds. And so that can be discouraging, but throughout COP, they talked about, banks are getting on board with this, and philanthropy is showing up and saying, like, hey, what is your sustainability plan, or how can we fund your sustainability efforts? And so that was really exciting to me, that we don't have to only rely on the federal government and sort of where it's blocked coming into the state. And then these are some protests that happened. And then this is my favorite. The mayor of Bogota, Colombia, gave this lovely speech, but she said at one point, "We must take care of our people so our people can take care of our democracy, so our government can take care of the planet." And it really struck me, because I do think that democracy is important, and I think that it's in danger, and I think that until we can figure that piece of it out, we're not going to be able to globally address climate change. And at the root of it all, it goes back to human beings. And so those are my takeaways, and I'm stealing the stage, sorry.
No, I love your takeaways. I think one of the things that I really valued about this experience is, when you're in my role, it's the 30,000 feet kind of all the time is what you're thinking about. And the details matter, and we get into the details with staff sometimes, but we're never in it as much as people like Gina are in. And to be able to just listen to Gina talk for a few days about all these things, to me was really, really, it was really important for me to be able to hear some of these things, because I don't have the knowledge that Gina has in the work that she does. It's really, there are so many details about some of these things that matter so much as we have the larger discussions, that I really appreciated that. And so I have two main takeaways that I really walked away with. And again, these are kind of from that 30,000 feet level. The first is, it goes back to something we've talked about pretty frequently throughout this presentation, and it's about the relationships that we have as a city and as people with other places and the other people who live there. Those relationships are what is going to get anything done in the city of Dubuque. If you think about where we are and what we're doing, I was talking to a few of you about just, some of you have been away for a while and you've come back and you have a new experience in a city that is very different from what you had before. We're doing pretty well. We've got a lot of good things going for us. The only reason that has happened, aside from really visionary people and who've done really hard work, is because those visionary people have formed really important relationships across the world with people who have resources and governments who have resources to be able to make it happen here. Those relationships that we have with our federal government partners, with state government partners, with other mayors, other cities, other climate action, sustainability directors and people like that, and then relationships outside of government entirely, those relationships are key to making sure that if we're going to take real action, we can actually get something done. And that leads into my second takeaway, which is that if we want to get something done in Dubuque, we need to be bold. And that's a difficult thing to say from my role, especially as we're going into budget season, as you talk about constrained budgets and all these different things. But it's true. And Gina said it, we don't live in a state right now that is supporting this work at a real high level. They're not providing resources. Our state legislature is, I think, stepping backwards from where we need to go in working towards real climate action in our world. And since that's the case, we have to do things despite a state legislature rather than in partnership with them. I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. So if we want to do that, we need to access some of these funds from other places. The federal government, sure, but it's organizations like Bloomberg Philanthropies, like the Bezos Earth Fund, all these different organizations that have real financial resources and the wherewithal to be able to help us on these efforts. And they're asking for bold action. They're not going to provide the resources to cities like us unless we really do something big and try to really push. So, I've presented quite a bit on our B Branch project, which is ironic because I have very little to do with it personally. I actually, it was the very tail end of that B Branch project is anything that I've done as a city council member or as a mayor. But the project itself is such a marvel of engineering and ingenuity in how it was put together and how it actually benefits our community that people want to know how to do that. And that's the type of boldness that we're talking about, is something really big like that, things that we can take, big swipes so that we can make the impact we need to make not just for us, but for the world. So I say that, and I'm always nervous when I say it out loud because I know I'm setting expectations for me and for the city council, but as I go into, we always do our goal setting every single August. As I go into that throughout the summer here and I'm thinking more about it, that's what's on my mind, and that's the conversation that I'm gonna have with our city council, with my city council colleagues, about what it's really going to take if we're serious about our sustainability initiatives here and our climate action plan in the city of Dubuque. So any and all ideas is kind of what I'm ready to look for and try to help with in any way that I can. So I think those are my two main takeaways.
They're good ones. I've just been kind of floating through some photos of the green zone when I wandered in that direction. This is the permanent exhibit at the Expo Center in Dubai. So they have the Laboratory of Future Values, the Hall of Consumption. But to get to the Laboratory of Future Values, you either have to choose the forest floor or the depths of the ocean to go through, and those are the directions the security guard gave me, so I was like, is this a trick? But I made it. And then these were from the cab ride to the airport, but this is the frame, the Dubai frame, which is a museum and the world's largest frame. Everything's the world's largest in Dubai. And then this is Burj Khalifa, which is the world's tallest building. It's just over a half a mile tall. And because of our local credit union's excellent security, I was not able to purchase a ticket to go up in it.
I didn't hear that story.
Even though they knew I was in Dubai, they wouldn't let me buy a ticket. So I took a picture of it instead. And then, like I said, these are hyperlinks, but and this is this wild building. So that's a reflection you're seeing. And then there were like words that floated across the side of it. And then these are people eating down here. The architecture was just bonkers. I don't know a different word to describe it. But so here are some different takes from the different groups that either we belong to or we were in meetings with a lot about COP28 and sort of their takeaways. I think we can do questions.
Yeah. Hey, go for it.
So Gina, I think this is a question for you. You talked about a grant application for you. Tell us a little bit more about specifically what you hope to do if the grant's funded.
Yeah, well, so this is...
Here, let's repeat the question. I'll take the mic to everybody. I forgot to do that. My role broke down. But the question is, go ahead.
So the question is, what are sort of my hopes if we're successful in this youth climate action grant? And so I've recently filled out some federal grants, which are really daunting and horrible, and big money. And this grant was like, hey, who are some people involved in your city, and what are 3 ideas that you have? I was like, is there more? Did I miss a page of the grant application? So we came up with a giant list of things we would like to see, but they really have to be youth-led. So it can't be my ideas. So what we considered our list that we came up with the Green Iowa AmeriCorps member in my office and my intern, was a list of like, here are some cool things we think would happen, or think are cool ideas, and here they are directly correlated to our climate action plan, but it has to be youth-led. So we don't know what we'll see. I would love to see our Marshallese population and the youth do something, anything. They're losing an inch of coastline a year. Climate change is deeply personal to them, and so I would certainly encourage them to apply for something. We have our Teen Resiliency Corps, and they've worked on different initiatives related to buildings and energy efficiency and disaster preparedness, and so if any of those teens want to come forward, it can be artwork, it could be convening of friends to talk about climate change. Like, it's wide open, which is the beauty of philanthropy, right? It's not prescriptive at all. So I'm really excited. I think it could be a really cool opportunity for Dubuque. And youth in this grant is defined as 15 to 24-year-olds. So it's not sort of this younger youth. It's folks who are really like, can be engaged and are ready to make movements happen.
Other questions? Coming at you.
Yeah.
Just curious, this is something Jim and I have talked about, were the solutions technology based? Was it the idea like we're going to technology our way out of this problem, or was it behavior based? Like where, and it's probably both, but I think we fall into the trap of saying, well, if we just get fusion energy going, we'd be fine, or if we get enough EVs on the road, we'll be fine. It's this idea of, I'd just be curious what you heard, if you had a takeaway of what they were saying, like how is this going to happen? So.
I think my biggest one that I'm thinking of was tripling renewable energy globally. That's the big call. Renewable energy. But I don't think people were trying to do like, what's the next big thing? It was like, we know we have to use more renewable energy, and that's what I kept hearing repeated over and over again. And then I think a lot of it was really like local-based climate action, right? Like what Felipe is doing in the Amazon basin is different than what I'm gonna be doing at a city level. And so that was another thing where it was like, what makes sense for sub-Saharan Africa is different than other places. So I don't know if you heard.
No, I would agree with that. And I think, because it is a little bit of both of what you described, right? I mean, you have to have, there has to be some sort of behavior change if we're gonna do things differently. But the technology is a big part of that. And I didn't hear anybody, and I haven't in the other conversations that I've been a part of over the last couple of years on these topics, I haven't heard anybody hiding behind the technology either and saying like, we don't need to do much different because we're just gonna use EVs and put up some windmills and everything's gonna be fine, right? What I hear people saying that are actually doing things about this, especially places like, I mean, you know, for all the challenges California has, they're way ahead of everybody else on the push toward renewables and electrification in particular. And when you talk to mayors that are in cities like, well, I mean, like, you know, San Francisco and places like that, I mean, you basically are hearing sort of what it's gonna be like in the rest of the United States before too long. And you can hear where the technology is going. So one of the things that I think is hopeful for me is that the technology is moving fast in a good direction toward being able to find ways to make things renewable, but then not exploitative to be able to get there. I mean, that's always the challenge when we're making these changes. So I don't think anybody's hiding behind that technology and saying that we only need to do that. I do think that the conversation is more comprehensive than that.
Mostly out of curiosity, but when you're saying protesters, why would they protest? This seems like a good thing, and I don't understand why they'd protest.
They want bolder, faster climate action. I mean, there were folks from, I think they're called the Pacific Water Warriors, and they're losing coastline. Their whole way of life is being threatened, and they're like, we're a teeny tiny nation, we have no funding, we need you guys, we're dependent on you to do something, and you're not doing it fast enough, and you're not doing enough. And so that was some of it. Some of it was protesting politicians that were there and saying like, yeah, you're here saying these things, but then you're gonna go back to your home country and do the opposite. A lot of it was fossil fuel, like end fossil fuel now, just, there's very black and white. So yeah, I mean, I think that's, people showed up. Some of it was really like peaceful and lovely, you know, they're singing songs and just like calling attention. Like this is important to us and we need people to do something about it. And we're feeling powerless, and so we're showing up to share our voice because that's the only power we have.
Government moves really slowly. I mean, that really is I knew I would be frustrated by that going into this role, but I definitely am. And it's hard because you're standing there looking at the thing that everybody wants to do and the solution. You're like, just go right there. It's easy. You can just go right there, you know? But there are these steps that need to be taken. And sometimes government gets in its own way, but usually it's the fact that government is made up of all of us. I mean, it's a large group of people in the world who need to come to an agreement in one place. So I think protesters play a really important role in that. I think that, you know, especially in any democracy, but I think in any part of the world, protests and using your voice in a way to make a point really bluntly and really quickly about what needs to happen is an important step in the governmental process. It is, because it is a slow slog to get there. And I can definitely understand why somebody who's losing an inch of coastline a year, or there was a large group of people from the Amazon who were there. I was fascinated by that. And they were loud. You know, they would just all of a sudden start shouting things, and everybody, again, everybody was very kind and I think civil about it, but it's at the same time making a real point, and I think it was a point well made.
I mean, if you look at the history of sustainability in Dubuque, it was also people, maybe not protesting, but really showing up and pushing local government to say, like, hey, you have to be a part of this. One of those people is in the room.
Yeah, that needs to keep happening too, by the way.
I'd like to kind of get back to home base here and try to give something practical that Dubuque can better in habits, and that is food waste. And I am a resident of Mount Carmel Bluffs, and we have tried to get that going in our home, the big home of Mount Carmel Bluffs. And it's going nowhere, and many of us that are there had food scrap materials when we were living in our homes. And so we know what it means, less for the landfill, thank you, I couldn't think of the word, landfill. And so I would like to see that resurrected. I don't want to wait 5 years, I might be dead. So I'd like to get it started now so that we don't throw away all of our food scraps, especially those of us that were used to being elsewhere with the green carts right in town. And so that I'm just going to plant that idea that we'd like to see that continue and grow. And I see many of the sisters here tonight from the congregations. I'm sure that they're on that department also, on that will to be sustainable right at home that everybody can do. I can't go to Dubai, but we can do something here that is meaningful, and I think we can promote it by features, letters to the editor, all of that stuff could be promoted. If that could happen, I think a lot of people would be very happy. And so that's my story. And there are some of us here tonight that work on paths toward zero waste. And that is one of our projects. And we have a really good green team going at Mount Carmel.
I'll address that one. It's more of a policy issue than anything else. Yeah, I know. I'll get you out of that one. You know, I've really appreciated this discussion starting. I'm going to stand in front of you, Gina, sorry. I've appreciated this discussion this year. It's really kind of been this year. Paul's been a big part of bringing that to our attention. And it is something that I'm thinking about more. I'm asking more questions of people of why this would maybe, why it's not happening now, why it's not working. As we go into the budget sessions that we have coming up, they're going to be near the end of March, the beginning of April this year. The timeline got moved back a little bit by the state of Iowa last year. So when we go into those are some questions that are on my mind that I want to bring up very openly in those discussions to figure out where are we in this process and what is it that would be slowing things down. I am hearing some reasons. I am hearing some explanations as to why this can't happen tomorrow. But I want to get a little more information on that to find out, well, if it can't happen tomorrow, why, exactly why not? What is it that's keeping that from happening? So there's a number of different factors that are involved. I understand that, again, with the whole moving slowly thing, but I also hear your point, Judy, even though you're 5 years, come on. I want you around longer than 5 years, Judy.
Since that was raised, yesterday, the Solid Waste Agency signed a document to become a permitted facility and accepting food scraps going up from 100 tons to 400 tons in this coming year, with a total capacity at the landfill to go to 2,000 tons of food scraps and 8,000 tons of other material. So it has achieved that this other is opening up. So things do move, but that was a move in the beginning that came from the public to do food scrap recycling in 2008. The other issue to share was what got on the agenda of the Obama administration is when Green Dubuque drafted the 50% by 2030 trend line for where we want to be in terms of greenhouse gases. And that brought us into the world connected to Bloomberg. We did the wastewater treatment plant. That came from protest, blocking the doors with the BVMs at the wastewater treatment plant to stop incinerating the solids that were going in and go to a more environmental technology. None of these were governmental money funded. All of these came from local action. So I agree that a lot of things at the level of city governments, should be tapping into, funds where they can. But there's all these other pieces that can begin to get these whole things going.
And I just wanted to add, our 50% by 2030 plan is a community-wide plan. So it's not just what the city is doing within our own operations, which we're trying to do better with, but also we need everyone in the city of Dubuque participating, businesses, religious organizations, individuals. So I appreciate your comments and just wanted to put that plug in, that you're all in charge of this.
And all doing something already. I mean, a lot of the things are already happening too, because that's absolutely true. But when we were at St. Francis the other day, I'm just amazed by how much is happening in one place with a group of people who are taking some serious action. All the way down to how many paper towels you're using in the bathroom at one time, which I appreciated because I know I saw the sign and I'm like, I will think about just using one. Thank you very much. But sometimes those really small things add up to really big things over time. And my point here is to say, as you come up with those ideas, share them with other groups, other places where large groups of people gather. I think it's really important that people understand the impact they can have, especially when it's more than just one person. Because when we're 100 people, we have a much larger impact. And sometimes that can be a negative impact, and sometimes it can be a really positive one. So continue to educate all of us about this. I think it's really important that we do that when we have some knowledge.
What? You can't stop it.
The first thing I wanted to say, though, is that I swoon over these two humans a little bit. These guys are amazing people, and we're lucky to live in the community that we live in Dubuque, where city leaders and local leaders are so approachable, right? You can walk up to these people anywhere you see them. They're engaged in the community. They're at the events. They want to talk to you. They truly love this place. And so that's why I'm here. That's why I'm raising my family here. I'm from Dubuque County, and I'm very, very thankful to have leaders like this leading our community. So I wanted to say that first. Second is you had mentioned 15-year-olds to 25-year-olds. I'm from a world of values, building value in people. And you got to understand your relationship to care, and you got to care to act. And you had mentioned Bloomberg Financial's philanthropy's focus on youth engagement and connection to the outdoors. And I'm curious if COP had any further focus on that disconnect and reconnecting people to nature in order to build that foundational value to want to act, to want to do this. And I was wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, what I can say is there were thousands of things happening that we have no idea what was going on. I mean, there are buildings after buildings after buildings of meetings and stages, and you could have spent just the whole time in one building and still missed out on things. So I'm sure there were lots of conversations about this. I popped in, there was one picture, I popped into like a youth and resilience pavilion conversation, and there were a group of 20 youngish people sitting around having a conversation, more around climate action and less around connection to nature. But I think that yes, that was maybe without not being said in the meetings we were in, it was certainly there, recognizing that like if we don't care about it, then we're not going to protect it. And I think that was where some of the hope came back for me, was that I was looking around and saying, all of these people care. care about this, and I'm not alone in my care. And so I didn't sit into something where it was like, we're going to connect kids back to nature, and then they're going to value it, and then they're going to save us. But I'm sure someone somewhere at COP was having that conversation, Jared.
Yeah, I would say I'm thinking really hard to try to remember if there was anything specific to that, and I don't recall anything really specific in that direction. In the way you said it, at least, like really making that connection between getting youth again connected to nature in a way that is going to then make this impact. So, but with that said, though, a couple of things. One is the more global conversation, and the one is the other local conversation that we've had. Globally, one of the things that I'm definitely hearing, and I think this might be familiar to everybody, is we built our world for about, I don't know, 50 years or so, just around the automobile. Everything is built around cars, everything. And nothing reminds me of that more than when I try to cross JFK to go to like anywhere on JFK, and you feel like you're running across the superhighway, and you realize, well, this was just built at that time. They knew not what they did. And it was, one of the things that's happening very actively is cities all over the world are talking about flipping that over and making that transition from everything being built around cars to being built around how people can move differently. So, and I mean all across the world. It was really the Bogota conversation. What is it? 20% of people in Bogota have automobiles, I believe, is what the number was. Everybody else on bikes. Their problem is bike traffic jams. Bicycle traffic jams is their issue that they were talking about, which I found fascinating. And so there's a lot of this discussion about how do you get people moving and outside and, in that way. So that's one thing. Locally, though, I do have to say, and Jared, you were instrumental in this. I want to tell you this, because you said to me when I decided to run for city council the first time, I think it was one of the first things out of your mouth, we need to get people connected to the river. We need kids to be more connected to this river. They need to be able to get in it. They need to be able to put their feet in there, understand what it is. That has resonated with people. And we just had a very recent work session about Chaplain Schmidt Island. There's a lot of action going on in Chaplain Schmidt Island. Don't get too caught up in the idea of that just being the casino that's doing that, because there's so much more happening with this. And one of the things that came up during that was something that was connected to the River Museum, which was being able to get into the river from Chaplain Schmidt Island. It's one of the easiest access points for people that are there just to experience the river in canoes or whatever, even just being there. And that's something that's being built into the plan as we go. It's a really cool thing to see. And people are starting to really understand what it means to conserve parts of that island as a natural space, and then also use it as an access point to the river, and just connect more to what we really are naturally as a place in Dubuque. So here, I think that conversation is happening very actively. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll also add that we recently got a $1.5 million grant to plant thousands of trees in a couple of census tracts in Dubuque. And so, well, it's not just like straight up nature. We're gonna do our little part to maybe make our streets a little bit more friendly, with some shade and maybe some fruit. I keep pushing for fruit trees. Public Works is like, no.
Again, challenges, but yeah. Yes.
At COP28, was there much representation from faith communities? And in particular, I'm wondering, we talk about everything here, and everything here is related to money and a government grant, and it's all about money, which of course, that's important and relevant, but it seems to me this is about changing hearts, okay? And I wish I had this figured out, but I wondered if there was this kind of conversation talking about faith being involved and what we need to do to change hearts, because it seems too often we're caught in this echo chamber, right? All of us here are the early adopters. That's why we're here, okay? But what percentage of the population in Dubuque are we? So how do we expand this in a way that this becomes a community-wide conversation? And how do we do it to change people's hearts? Because I don't think until we change people's hearts, we're going to cause them to really change their actions. And it's those actions that need to take place to really address this. So, long question. Let's talk about faith and what kind of, what you saw at COP28 that way.
Well, I pulled up the picture of the Faith Pavilion, and I know that there's always been a presence of different religious leaders at COP because Sister Michelle Balick attended COP4. She was telling us when we were there. And I know my dear friend, Sister Barbara, who is a sister of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary in the Pacific Northwest, their order does a lot of water rights works, and they've been present at COPs before. I think this might be one of the first faith pavilions where they had a dedicated space for to focus on faiths and the faith community's climate action. And here in Dubuque, we have a really active group of folks who are working on it. And I love your question because I was like, how do we change people's hearts? If you know, could you tell me? And it goes back to Jared's value, what we value. I was meeting today with a group of students from University of Iowa. They're a part of the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities, which is several different students in various fields of study that are doing 16 projects in Dubuque this school year. And this is a journalism and mass communications group. And so they were visiting and they're helping us, work on what is our communication strategy for the sustainability office. And they had different subsets of folks that they were gonna focus on. And I said, hey, you should really tap into the faith organizations here because they're doing a ton of work and they have a lot of people that they can spread this word to. And the other thing I said to them was, there's a spectrum of people. There are the people who are early adopters and who are all on board and like, we need to do more. And there are the people who are like, Gina Bell, you are a waste of taxpayer dollars and your office should be eliminated. And I'm not gonna try to convince those people, but there's like, from this person to over here, these people are the folks that we wanna convince. And it shouldn't be hard to convince, right? This is about livability. This is about comfort. I mean, I always say, people don't talk about climate action, but they talk about like access to transportation or like, hey, I can't get to work because the bus schedule doesn't work, or my heating bills are really high and I don't know what I'm gonna do. And to me, I'm like, well, that's climate action, right? Like, let's conserve energy, let's make sure your house is well weatherized, and let's make sure that we can tap into renewables or work with the energy company to do something about it. But people don't talk like that. So some of it's like making the connections that are already there. And I think if you can we're seeing with the low-income solar program, it's like one person told their neighbor, who told their neighbor, who told their neighbor, and they said, well, how did you advertise this? And I was like, we did like one project and all of a sudden everyone was interested. So some of it is like just getting the word out via word of mouth, but in terms of like shifting hearts, I haven't figured that out.
Yeah, and I haven't figured it out either. I'm just pointing it right out. But I do think that's where, your question really, I think, speaks to the fact that this is a far larger effort than any one governmental entity can do. One of the things that I see is so often people will look to the city and say, well, we can't do something, city, you go and do it. And you give us some money to do this, as if there's this, we don't print the money in the basement of City Hall, for example. And it's we keep it in the post office is where that money is printed, so that's where we do that.
That basement's super scary.
Yeah, I've never been in that basement. So so I think it speaks to the fact that this is a conversation we need to have within faith communities as well as within governmental entities and public meetings and all these different things. I'm also a believer in changing behavior, so changing hearts through behavior. I think it goes back to my days in the cognitive behavioral therapy world, where you can change how you think by what you do, and you can change what you do by how you think. You come at those from a couple different directions. And I think that when we take action, it really does, people notice it. And sometimes people notice it for good reasons, and sometimes people notice it for not so great reasons. You had the spectrum up here, and this one on the left over here concerns me greatly, where people say things like, Gina shouldn't even exist as an office.
I hear that from a governmental standpoint. And I'll just say it generally comes from our state legislature. There are people in the state legislature who say things like, you know, cities like Dubuque shouldn't have a sustainability office. We shouldn't have an office of shared prosperity that is working actively on making sure that we alleviate poverty in our community. And you shouldn't have a budget for those things. That's outside of your mission as a city. I just wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think it's what we want. It's what we need. It's what Dubuque needs to do. So I hope that through some of those actions we take, we can also be a part of that process of changing how people are thinking about things. It is an important question, so thank you for asking it. Yeah. Come around.
The other thing that I think hurts our actions and hurts our making real progress is that sometimes the activism that goes into addressing climate change is very extreme, okay? And it's meant to try to shock people. And I don't think we're doing anybody any favors by throwing soup on the Mona Lisa, okay? And some of you know exactly what that is. On February 1st, some protesters went into the Louvre and threw soup on the Mona Lisa. And they thought that that was going to somehow change the hearts and minds of people that would want to impact and curb climate change. All that does is make you look like a bunch of kooks and protesters, and it only drives a bigger wedge. So I think some of this is self-created. You know, the fact that you had a whole area there for protesters, well, who were you protesting to? You were preaching to the choir. So, you know, what does that accomplish at the end of the day? I don't know. It's about evangelizing and reaching out further. And like I said, if we all had that answer to how we would do that, we wouldn't have a problem at all, right?
Do we have time for one more? What do we have for?
I just want to be respectful of your time. I know we've gone a little late, but if you want to take another question, maybe.
Oh, I had it on my calendar until 8 o'clock, so.
Oh, okay, all right.
Is anybody, what time
Did
was
I
it on?
invite you? That was to trick me, I think.
Was that to
Sorry,
trick you?
I tricked us
So,
both.
how about we do, would one more work for everybody? Is that okay? And then we could just hang out and have some conversation.
I applaud everything you did, and that the fact that the mayors gathered at COP28. You know, and Gina, I'm aware of what you said a little while ago. That's where so many of the decisions, influential decisions, are made. But I'm also thinking of the thousands and thousands of acres outside the cities and what's happening there that impacts climate. You know, and I guess I'd like to see what, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but was there anything for county supervisors? You know, you think of the acres being, you know, first of all, heavily fertilized, heavily used with insecticides and so forth, pesticides rather, and also so many acres being paved over, very influential. Did any of that get addressed directly, or was it just not?
I don't know if there were any county leaders that were invited as a part of the Bloomberg group.
There were a few governors there as presenters, but that was it. I don't remember there being county leaders. And I don't remember in our conversations, at least, many conversations about agriculture in general, especially commercial agriculture. I don't recall those conversations, and I didn't stay as long as Gina did. So
No, I don't think anyone wants to touch that.
well, I think people are talking about it, but the fossil fuels really take all the oxygen in the room. You know, that when that conversation is happening, it's more about that with COP, I think. But I definitely see where you're going. I mean, we need to have a serious conversation about how we can do more from an agricultural standpoint, for sure. It's challenging for us, you know, because I think one of the reasons we didn't hear a lot of that is because most of the places that we were talking to were pretty urban cities. We're probably one of the more rural cities that was in this group that was there. And I think what we do hear a lot about is urban agriculture. That is something that comes up as a conversation piece fairly frequently, is how, going back to Gina's earlier point, it's really within cities where conservation work is occurring, because outside of cities is what you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, Johnson County and Lynn County in Iowa both have sustainability directors on staff. Yeah, I mean, Dubuque doesn't, but there are counties that do have my position as a part of their government.
Well, with that, we will be happy to sit around and talk for a few more minutes with anyone who has any further questions, but I think from a program standpoint, we'll wrap it up for the evening. Do you have anything you want to add before we go?
I could quickly. I'd just like to ask if we could all give a round of applause to Mayor Cavanaugh and Gina. So we thank you so much for sharing your enthusiasm and your information and for your gracious allowance of time here. And if you're welcome or willing to stick around for a little while, I'm sure there are more questions, but we'll formally conclude for now. So thank you all for being here and for those who may be watching by Zoom.
Thanks.
Oh, is that how you do it? You do it, give yourself an extra half hour so you don't have to worry about it? Wow, explains it later. Worked out.